Casey here with CL Creative, where I'm teaching you web design and Webflow one video at a time. And today we're going to talk about creating fade in and stagger animations with Gsap, Green Sock Animation Platform. Why are we going to do this? Well, it can be more performant than having to load Webflow's animation library just simply to create some fade in and stagger animations. And it can be much easier to add to your project. With a little bit of custom code and using some attributes, we can easily add in these fade in animations wherever we want on our project. And so, as you work on your own website or if you work on client websites, it can be super easy to throw this code into a global embed and then add these attributes wherever. And it not only allows you to continue to modify where you want these fade in or stagger animations to be, but you can also allow your clients to do the same. So let's jump into the computer and check things out. All right, well, here we are in the computer. Let me show you what we're going to be working with here, or working on here today. And so if I load this up, we're going to see a page load animation. This is not what we're going to be working on today, but in a future lesson, we'll be doing that. But essentially, as soon as I scroll up, you see there's nothing there, and then that just simply fades in. And then we also have a fade list animation or stagger animation. You'll see that here with these portfolio items right there. And you saw those just kind of faded in. And as you work down the page, you're going to see a lot of fade in animations that are going to be taking place. These are super easy to create, and they can just elevate your site a bit more than just being a static page, right? And it doesn't take that much as far as coding goes, but there are some things that we need to work on to set up. So stay with me throughout this video, and I'm going to show you all of the different things that we need to set this up. And so the first thing that we need to do, and I'm going to do this in my code editor. Essentially, you're going to place this, and I'll show you in a moment, you're going to place this in a custom code embed inside of Webflow. But essentially, the first thing that we need to make sure that we do is we need to register our ScrollTrigger plugin. And really, prior to that, one of the things that you want to make sure that you do is go over to Gsap. You're going to click on, you're just going to go to their website. You're going to go to Get Gsap whenever the page loads, and then you're going to scroll down to the CDN. And the two things that we are going to need is just the standard library as well as ScrollTrigger. And so we're just going to copy this right here, and you're going to place this in the head of your website. We'll get back to that here in a minute. I'm just going to stick it here for now. It's going to give me some errors because this is in my JavaScript file. So let me just comment this out for now, but we're just going to save this at the moment. Then we're going to register our plugin, and the next thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that we are going to grab all of our different elements that have this fade in attribute. And so we're going to create a variable here. We're going to use gsap.utils.toArray, and we're going to grab every element that has a fade in attribute applied to that. And so if we go back over here to the website, you're going to see here I have a fade in. If I jump into this component on this whole section, I've essentially placed a custom attribute, and it's just fade in. There's no value, just fade in. That's all that you need. And so all I'm doing here in this code is I'm creating a variable that is grabbing this fade in element. And the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to run a for each loop on this with the gsap from to method. And so we're just going to start that out. We're going to use our fade in element. It's right here, this variable. We're going to run a for each loop on that, and we're going to run that on every fade in. And then we're going to use a gsap from to. And so we want to run this on the fade in element, and we're going to set up just our from method here first. And so we're going to run this on our fade in element, and all we're going to do is we're going to make these elements that we place this fade in attribute on, we're going to turn them initially to an opacity of 0, and we're going to move them down 20 pixels on the Y axis. Now, you can move them however you want. This is just how I'm going to do it, so I get that nice fade in animation as I go down the page. Now, one thing that I would caution you with and what you need to be careful with is that running this from to method here, if these elements are in view when the page loads, you may get a little bit of flicker. And so that's why I haven't really used that on any of the hero sections on my website or any of the first sections that could show on the website. So this right here is set up so that it's always going to be 100 VH. And then this right here is going to be the second section. You're not going to be able to see it on any of the screens that you might look at this on. And so this is why I started the fade in animation here. So just something to be aware of. There are certainly ways around getting that flash of unstyled content while the JavaScript library is loading. We're not going to talk about that in this video, but you want to place this on elements that are not initially visible. Now, the next thing that we are going to do is we're going to create our final state, going to turn it to opacity of 1, and we're going to move it back to 0, and we're going to do this over a duration of 0.5 seconds. Now, we need to set up our scroll triggers. Essentially, we're going to set up our scroll trigger, and the actual trigger is going to be that fade in element. So the element that we place the fade in attribute on is going to be our trigger. This is going to start at the top of the element when it reaches 60%. And so if I jump back over here, I've placed this already on my unpublished side. I've made the markers true so that we could see them. And so you can see that this start position where the fade in animation is going to start is going to be at 60%. So 60% from the top of the screen down. And this is the end mark at 50%, though this isn't necessarily going to do much for us because everything is going to start here and it's just going to run the fade in animation for us. And so again, this is what we are looking at here when we see start at 60%. So when the top of the element that we have the fade in, that we have our trigger on, which is going to be the element that has the fade in attribute on it, the animation is going to start when we reach 60% of the viewport. And it's just going to essentially run. Now here I have markers true. The code that I'm going to place online, I'm going to go ahead and turn this off. So these markers that you see over here will not be on initially, but you can uncomment this and see that. So that is our fade in animation. So next what we need to do is we need to add in our fade list animation. And so let me just go ahead and copy the beginning of this code for us. And essentially, we are just doing the same exact thing. We're creating a variable fade in lists, and we're going to use Gsap's utilities to array, and everything that has this fade list on it is going to, represent this variable. Now, one of the things that we are doing different in this, if I go ahead and add in this Gsap from to, the one thing that we are doing different is this fade in list. Right, and I'll show you here in just a second. We're just going to grab the children inside of that fade in list. And we're doing the same exact thing that we did with the fade in. So we're going to fade from an opacity of 0. So opacity of 0 to a Y of 20 is where we're going to start. And then we're going to go opacity 1 to Y0, same duration. The only difference is we're adding in this case, a stagger. Trigger is going to be the fade in list this time. So it's whenever the list hits, same exact start endpoints, and markers true is on. I'll go ahead and turn those off. But if you come back over here, you're going to see that is the fade in animation that is taking place. Also have this on another page over here that's a little bit different. As we scroll down some, you're going to see right here, this is another fade list animation that's taking place. So you can place this on CMS-driven items. You can place this on other items. The difference, as you'll see here, is that I have this list that's taking place, and I have the children inside that. So the item is the children, and those are the things that are being faded in. But again, the attribute is applied to the list. So fade list. And if we jump over here, this is a CMS example. If I jump over here to my About page, you will see a non-CMS example. Here I just have a bunch of portfolio images. This right here is getting the fade list attribute. because these are all of the children that are inside there. So if we jump back over to our code, you're going to see that. You're going to have the fade list up here, and then it's going to be targeting the children for that actual fade in animation. Okay, so a next thing that we need to set up is we're going to end this, but there's also the idea of refreshing the page. And so Webflow is going to load everything, and we just want to make sure that our scroll trigger is in the right place whenever we load the page. Now, prior to doing this, I had some issues. I'm going to show you another fix here in just a second, but prior to doing this, I had some issues with my my animations at times triggering much faster. And so they were working, but you couldn't see them because they were taking place before you even scrolled into that particular section. And so one of the things that I found after much research is that we can do a set timeout. And so that's essentially what we're doing here. We're just calling a set timeout function. After everything has loaded on the page, we are then going to call this set timeout function, and it's going to wait 1.5 seconds in order for it to load, and it's just going to refresh our scroll trigger so everything just moves back into place in case anything got out of place whenever we loaded the page. Now, one of the things that you also want to do along with using this set timeout, and this requires a bit of setup inside of your project, but one of the things that you want to make sure to do is that pretty much on everything inside of your project, you're going to have an aspect ratio. So Webflow has come out with this aspect ratio. It makes it super easy for us to apply that to our images. This is going to help you on the SEO front, but this is also going to help you if you're utilizing ScrollTrigger to make sure that the trigger is actually firing at the right time, because it's going to keep things from moving around. It's going to keep a space for those particular items as they are loading. And so here I've just set on this video lightbox image, I've set a widescreen 16:9 ratio. And if you come down, you're just going to see that, pretty much on these I haven't set a ratio, but if I open this up, you're going to see that I've set a square ratio there. On this one right here, I've set a widescreen ratio. And then as you go down on almost every single image on my page, I have a ratio set. Here's a landscape ratio as well. Now, sometimes you may have an image that does not fit the ratio, and so you need to set a custom image, a custom ratio. And so if we go down here, I'm going to show you that on this right here, it doesn't really fit any of the ratios. I could have forced it into a widescreen, but I didn't really want to. I wanted it to be correct. And you may run into this on your own website. You may run into this on some client sites where you don't really want to cut off the image. You want to set the exact ratio. And so what I've done is I've set a custom ratio on that. And the way that I've gotten these measurements is right here. The width is 1840 and the height is 941. And essentially what you want to do is place a decimal point after the first, if it's 4 characters for your numbers, then you're going to place the point right after the second character. And here, if it's just 3 characters, then you're going to place the point right after the first character or first numeral. And so this is what I've done, 18.4 and 9.4. Now, you might be thinking, well, where did you get this from? And this interface looks a little bit different. One thing that I would commend to you, if I can find it here, is the potato extension created by Harshit. This thing is awesome. It's super helpful, and I use it all of the time. Primarily, I'm using it to add the width and height to these images, and so it makes it really easy just to add these original dimensions, and then I can add a custom ratio if I need to. But another thing that is really nice is that it helps you when it comes to naming classes particularly within the client first system, but you don't have to be using client first in order to utilize the naming capacity for this. Go ahead and download the potato extension, add it to your Chrome browser, and utilize it. There's other things that it does, but those are the 2 things that I use it for the most. All right, so we have our code added. or set up. We've got our custom aspect ratios there. We have our scroll trigger, set timeout going on. The other thing, that we would actually consider adding a manual refresh. And so I was using this a lot prior to figuring out, hey, I actually needed to add an aspect ratio, and I could just utilize this set timeout as well to really help me get there. But, and I'll add all of these notes to the blog post, but the other aspect is that you can manually refresh sections. And so if you're still having trouble, what it's going to do is it's going to manually refresh ScrollTrigger whenever you get to this particular section. So whenever this thing leaves the viewport, then ScrollTrigger is going to be refreshed. And you can set this up to refresh it at other points as well, but this is what I found worked the best. It's essentially what you would do is if you just wanted to say, like, for instance, hey, I want this section right here to do a manual refresh, then you can go on and what I did in the past is I just stuck it on the section, and then you just essentially go in here and add, refresh right there. And then whenever this section leaves, it's going to refresh ScrollTrigger, and it's going to be ready for the section that's coming after it. And that section is going to trigger right. You did this a lot on sections where, I had ScrollTrigger already applied, so this is why I used the on leave. But you can also do this on sections where ScrollTrigger is not applied. Like the fade in or fade list animation is not applied. I found in the past, before I started using the aspect ratio and using the set timeout, that I needed to refresh those sections that I placed a fade list animation on that were particularly coming from a CMS. And so you may run into that issue in the future if you set everything up right. I've done this on multiple projects after testing this on mine, and I haven't run into any issues, and I haven't had to add any sort of manual refreshes to any sections. Everything has been working perfectly, but I'm still going to include this in the code. I'm going to make you aware of this just in case there's some instance where you see that, hey, ScrollTrigger is running too fast, like it's triggering my elements before they even get on the page. Then you can add this. Now, I would be careful with this as you're refreshing ScrollTrigger a bunch. This is providing a deep refresh as well, and it can create some performance issues if you use this too much. And this is why I started really searching for more and more things to add in. Now, once you are ready to add this to your project, what I would suggest is I use a global styles embed, and inside of this embed goes on every single page, and you have a code embed, which basically has a lot of different stuff, particularly when it comes to client first. But then I also have a Gsap animations embed, and these are the Gsap animations that I want to run on every single page of my website. Now, a fade in and a fade list animation is a great candidate for that, right? It's a great candidate to run this on every single page on your website. And so I would create a global styles embed or a global embed, put it inside of a component, or make it a component, and then place that on every single page on your website. And I'm going to open this up, and you're going to see that I have a lot more than just these fade in animations in here that I'm running on a lot of different pages, particularly my page transition animations. But this is the place where you're going to stick this code up here, right? That's actually calling the libraries. And so this is super important. You're going to put this code up here at the top, and I've placed a defer tag on it as well so that it is deferring this call. And then the rest of it, you're pretty much just going to paste verbatim, right? This window.webflow, you're going to paste all of this. You want to make sure that you place script tags at the beginning, and if I move myself, at the end. So you want to make sure that you have those script tags there as well, or it's not going to work. But other than that, you're ready to go. So hopefully that's helpful. If you have any questions, put those down in the comments. If you found this video helpful, give me a like. Tell me how you're also using this on your projects or how things have gone for you in the comments below. And if you have any suggestions for any other videos, put those in the comments below. I'll read those comments, I'll reply to those comments, and I will try to make a video for you, answer any questions that you have. See you on the next one.